cough is all.
Oh, is that it? Hey guys, Dave from Nerdarchy, for nerds by nerds, and I got Jaren DM with me, or Jaren D&D with me today in the house, and we're going to be talking about a product you have recently released on the DMs Guild. You got some other things coming up, and you have a YouTube channel, and also your YouTube channel is all about accessibility for gamers.
Yes, it's Power Up Gamers Role Playing for Accessibility. And the basic idea of it is that we feel it shouldn't matter a person's disability, a special need, religion, political view, gender. Everyone should have equal access to the hobby. A, and that's what we try to strive to make happen in a positive environment that will be beneficial to everyone.
Now, I was poking around over on your YouTube channel, and you're not the only person over there.
No, I've had co-hosts, hosts, I had Chris Johnson and Nate McCrino as guest co-hosts for a while. Troubles Gromis has recently agreed to be a permanent co-host, although he's been MIA for a month or so. Oh, and we have a couple other people that are looking at coming aboard. But our little Facebook community is about 200 people, a lot of whom have special needs.
We've had Jen Kretschmer on the show in the past, and she's a huge advocate for gaming and gamers with that have accessibility needs and special needs.
Awesome. Yeah, I know who she is. We have a lady that as as conventions and as one of the supervisors for making sure the conventions are accessible. That's a member of our group, although she doesn't post much and barely responds, but I imagine it's because she's busy.
So before we got started, we were talking, and you were kind of telling me how you got involved with this and what prompted you to start on this path. Would you like to share that?
Sure. It actually happened in my 20s, which is 20 some odd years ago. So before it was even really a thing. And, and I lived in Salem, Oregon at the time with my biological father, who has multiple sclerosis and is in a wheelchair full time. And we would go down to the local gaming store. I'd play Magic the Gathering, get D&D books, etc. And occasionally he would go and get me something. And if I was busy, because I was in school, college at the time, and as well as working full time. And the shop was structured in such a way, it was a small gaming shop to begin with. But he didn't even have enough room to get inside in his wheelchair. So he would have to sit outside until one of the staff happened to notice him. They'd have to come out, see what he wanted, go back and get what he wanted. And I just thought that wasn't right. At the very least, he should be able to get inside up to a counter or to talk to the staff. So ever since, I've been kind of trying to make people aware of special needs that people have in order to do what normal people would do. And I use the terms normal people loosely because I really do believe there is no such thing as normal.
You know, it's one of those things that I think most people just don't think about it. It's not intentional or malicious. It's just a matter, and I've been guilty of this as well. But doing these shows has really brought up my awareness of things, and you know, talking just to a lot of people in the community that someone who frequents a shop and they just walk through the door, they're not thinking about, well, you know, is this the right size door for everyone, or you know, or whatever the case may be. But I think things are getting better where people are becoming a lot
It
more aware.
it it is, and part of that is over the last 25 years is it's through the effort of people who's doing stuff like I am, that it's come to the attention of the community at large that the people with special needs enjoy this hobby too. Uh, before, back in the old days, before we played online, etc., unless you had someone with a special need in your group, you didn't really see them.
And that's just it. Like, visibility is way up now. I remember having a Twitter fight with a couple other people on Twitter, and you know, about D&D Beyond, and people were really angry about having to buy things again, and that servers as a whole. Which, you know, I'm kind of always like, well, if you don't like something, don't pay for it. If that's your beef. But you know, so we were having this discussion, and you know, someone else chimed in, and they were visually impaired, and they're like, hey, you know, this thing may not be for you, and I understand your point of view, but this is actually one of the few things that allows me access to all of the content in a way that I can take it in. Please don't try and make that go away.
Yeah, yeah. It's actually kind of funny because one of the members of our group is working on transferring supplements into Braille. He's already done Braille dice. But that's part of what we use. We support other programs like the DOTS program, Special Olympics X.
So, and I imagine it's a huge challenge too from a business standpoint, where like it's already a tiny niche, and then when you're like, oh well, how do I service all these areas, like because you know everyone's special needs is gonna be different. How do I service all these different areas and still maintain profitability of it, which probably can't be done.
It is hard to juggle things, but I found a lot of things really come down to just being willing to listen to the people. Oh, oh. Most people with special needs, it's if you're open and sincere about wanting to help them meet their needs, will tell you what they need.
Yeah, I mean, and thankfully we have technology for certain things. I think like readers are a lot more like that's probably a lot easier to do than converting things to Braille per se. Like maybe that's the middle ground.
Yeah, there's different ways and different technology that works for different people. Oh, even within something in like blindness or visual impairments, there's gonna be a difference of what works for the people. Oh, and that's simply because we're all different.
Well, exactly. There's going to be different needs, but you know, like I said, like I like now I'm also always a lot more cognizant when someone goes to try something and do something, and maybe we're talking about it on a show, and I'll bring that up to them, and they're like, "Oh, we never just thought of that." You know, now it's something for them to look into. We've definitely had that happen.
And in fact, I'll even tell you about one of my projects that has been in the books for years is an actual PDF about disabilities and using them in game sessions without being offensive, of how to handle players who have certain types of special needs, as well as GMs, because a lot of GMs are just started to see people over to special needs GM. Where back before, we were lucky to even be players.
Well, you know, in that sense, the world has definitely opened up for everybody. So, you know, that's one of the great things about the hobby for sure. You know, you're not the first one to mention like that kind of product either. I think Christopher Rose had talked about working on something similar as well.
Yeah, it's been it's definitely been a struggle to do that. Uh, uh, it's definitely a lot harder than your typical supplement.
So, is your idea to take it from both the character standpoint, but as well as the player?
The way we have it set up is there's 3 sections and overall. The first section deals with uh, what are what are these disabilities, is some common symptoms, things you might experience, and and with a list of little tips and tricks for each one for dealing with a player or a DM who has this special need. The middle section talks about how to include them in a setting inside of a game session, such as an NPC who's blind. And then the third section is kind of a mix of some NPCs, such as a blind swordsman, and along with a little bit of kind of a generic setting in pretty much based out around D&D, because that's what I'm familiar with. So it kind of covers the whole span. And it's been in the books for a good 2 years now, and we're maybe halfway done with it.
So I imagine, and you guys have the group put together for that. I imagine that takes a lot of input from a lot of different people, because even if you are someone with special needs, it doesn't make you an expert on everybody's needs.
Oh no, it definitely a lot of research, a lot of consulting, and then trying to word everything in a way that's not offensive.
It reminds me a little bit of like trying to juggle chainsaws.
Yeah, and the wording is where we're having a lot of issues, because even being politically correct can be offensive.
Yeah. You know offensive in itself is very subjective.
For example, my racial or heritage, I'm part Native American, as they call it, and part German. But if you call me a Native American, that's gonna offend me. I'm an Indian. Even though we were here first.
That is definitely an interesting take.
Yeah.
So the
But
Mighty Hobbs has a question for you.
sure.
When do you think this book will be available? It sounds awesome.
At at this point in time, we're hoping maybe the end of 2019. We have a couple other projects that are in the works as well that kind of need to come out first. Originally, it was going to be the first supplement we put out because it's definitely one of the most important ones for me personally and for our group as a whole. Oh, but the workload on it is just so immense and that it's taken way longer than we thought it would.
How big of a team do you have working on it?
You're looking at it.
Okay. I was
Yeah.
just curious because I know you guys do have a product out right
Yeah.
now, and it is. I guess by you guys I mean you, Jaren. You do have a product out now in Drive Through RPG, and I was looking at some of the credits, and there's some names on there I recognize.
Yeah. Originally on the product that's on the back burner. Originally, there were three of us working on it, kind of the broad concept, the outline of what to include. But after the outline bit was done, it's been all me.
Sometimes
And
it happens that way,
yeah.
long projects. It's hard to keep everyone on the same page.
Oh, oh, definitely a a a. But the drive-through RPG supplement, the God's Tomb of Amazing Creatures. We originally had 4 people, all counting myself. 2 of them dropped, opt out, and then we brought aboard Alex for page design and layout, which was a blessing because I'm still learning that area.
Yeah, Alex is great. He was actually on the show recently with
Yes, I know.
yeah, with the other guys from Critical Hit Publishing, and he's been on individually in the past as well. But yeah, the guys all on Critical Hit Publishing are doing great work over there. So
Oh, oh yes, he is totally awesome and just a great guy, and
so
he's always been easy for me to approach if I have a particular question or need a bit of advice.
So Legat's Tome of Amazing Creatures is what you have on RPGs or
Yes.
Drive Through RPG right now. I always get that backwards for some reason. Um, and you sent me over a copy, and I was looking at it. I only like kind of like thumbed through it, but the art looks really good.
Oh, I was really pleased with the art, and and it was a big project in itself, and there's 2 more volumes coming up in the near future. Because originally the list was 72 monsters, and it was all planned on being released at once.
And how many monsters are in the current product that's out?
26. Even though on the Kickstarter we promised 20, we broke them into 3 batches of 26.
Okay.
And this one actually kind of rotates around the theme of planar creatures and elementals. That's why you'll notice a lot of fake creatures, the Gajum, which are for a common term are interdimensional vampire assassins.
What campaign does not need interdimensional vampire assassins? So there's 54 pages, and 33 of which is your monsters, and then from there, you've got some tables, some adventure hooks, locations. So there's more in there than just the monsters.
Oh, definitely. And a, a lot of the stuff in there was stretch goals that we had promised, although they're not quite as expanded as we would have done if we had have hit all our stretch goals. But there were a couple things like the venture hook table and the locations that I thought would be important for a DM. And some of them are really nice. I have certain favorites of everything.
So what was some of the highlights to working on the project?
I think the biggest highlight for me was seeing the artwork come to life. Because at first we had really rough sketches based around, okay, we want a hearse that looks like it's in a tornado, which is the Breezeburn, or in the supplement, and then seeing and just all the details that the artist did and how it actually captured the description and that I provided them was just amazing. And the Breezeburn picture is one of my favorites.
So we have a question from T-Type Toby. He wants to know your favorite race and class combo.
Race and class combo. Man, that's tough because I've had a lot of there's two that particularly stand out. My lawful good tiefling paladin, and I really like him. And then I have a gnome wizard who is a mute, and I really enjoy playing him and his familiar raven that talks.
So you do all your verbal role playing through the familiar?
Through the raven, who happens to be a total or smart aleck.
Nice. So I feel like you're losing something though when you make a gnome mute, because like their biggest thing is being motor mouths and pranksters and jokesters. I mean, not that you can't do that. You can't be a prankster or a jokester if you can't talk, but
you do lose a little bit, but I like kind of the gimmick of the raven. For example, one of my favorite lines came from one of the first times ever I played him. And we happened to have a druid who shape changed into a cat. And my raven came flying into the tavern to do the talking for me. And the cat looks up, licks his lips. And the raven goes, "Oh, dang it, I'm a familiar, not dinner." And just every player cracked up, and it was just a good time.
So there's a couple things in the chat, and I also had something else I was going to bring up, but Rogers, mountain monsters seem to lack prey animals. Where are the blazing rabbits? The Mighty Hobbs has a question. I just thought that comment was funny. And what do you think the most important thing GMs who don't have much experience with disabilities can do for players that have disabilities?
Okay. I would say the most important is communication with the player. Don't be afraid to ask them what they need. But you have to be sincere in wanting to know. Oh,
And I think that's one of the biggest obstacles too is people being afraid to talk about it, and they're afraid of hurting someone's feeling or being
yeah,
inadvertently being offensive.
yeah. But if you if you're really a sincere and kind of polite on how you say it, for example, someone that's blind, because that's an easy one to kind of deal with. Hey, I notice is you don't see a is what can I do to make your experience better? And then they'll say, well, if we could have things in a set position and not move them around, and if we have braille eyes, a braille character sheet, whatever they need. Usually people with special needs will say what they need.
I imagine too they could also be helpful in as far as telling you how to get those things or what to do.
Yeah.
So they're going to have more knowledge in that area. Like we actually had an incident on the show where one of the gentlemen was in a wheelchair. I didn't know. You see, you see this much of a person when they're on, but the only thing that I saw and the audience saw was he was wearing fingerless gloves. So I thought, well, that's odd, but I'm like, okay, whatever. And, I just let it go. But then someone in the chat did say, what's up with the gloves? And, and then someone else who was in the chat that knew the person was like, well, this is why. And that's where things kind of get can be a little awkward or tricky, because I'm sure that person, after they had asked the question, they probably felt and got the answer, they kind of felt like this big.
Yeah. And chances are you could have read the question to that person and have him answer it, and it wouldn't have been an issue.
So and I do kind of filter some of the questions, and that was definitely one I did because I didn't know. So and that's just it. Like, information and communication in pretty much all things make things better.
Exactly. And it's something that can be used by anyone, and regardless of who you are in learning how to talk to people.
And unfortunately, there's a lot of people that are a little bit socially awkward and inept in our niche, in our hobby. So that doesn't really help.
Yeah. It definitely is a lot better than it used to be, but there's still room for improvement.
There always is. Now, in the supplement you want to do about accessibility and disabilities in the game, are you going to cover service animals?
There actually is a small section on that under the blindness. Is simply because as that's kind of a circle. Because when you think of someone who's blind, they either have the cane or the seeing eye dog.
But more recently.
Even though recently service animals has expanded to include other things, but that still tends to be what people think of first.
Sure. Well, a good example too, though, is like your gnome character that was
Yeah.
mute, that used the raven to communicate through, is another good example.
Yeah. Uh, 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 my stepfather, who has OCPD, a we own a little dog, and but in the process of getting it as a service animal because it calms him down.
When we were growing up, one of my friends, his dad was essentially a quadriplegic, with very, very, very little movement in. I don't think it was exactly quadriplegic, but very, very little movement in the arms, and none in the legs. And he would always talk about getting a service monkey to shave him. But that only makes me think of that movie. I forget the name of the movie where they have the monkey gets the monkey that is a service animal, but it's kind of like a thriller horror movie where the monkey starts murdering people. So.
But yeah, so we do have a section that will deal with that, but it's pretty small and pretty basic. It's pretty. One of the big tips for that is don't touch the animals without their owner's permission.
I had a blind friend. I used to get in trouble all the time because I see the dog, and I go, oh, dog.
Yeah, I actually learned that from a blind friend as well. And the reason for that is because the animal is working. And he didn't care if you pet the animal, but you let him know, and he would call him to his side. I make him sit down, and then it was a very set way they allowed you to give attention to the animal, and the animal knew it. And then they were like at home, because I would visit my blind friend over there, and he wouldn't have the dog in the harness. You could rough house and play with the dog just like any other dog.
Fraginator, I'm totally calling you out on it. Well, to be fair, you can't. He can't see you petting it. They know. They can tell. Can tell how the animal reacts and what the animal's doing, and and the hearing, and I know, like, my dad. My first exposure to, like, probably a blind person was a friend of my dad's, and he could maneuver all around his house without no problem. It was memorized. He had service animals, and like he would even throw stuff to someone and put it exactly where he wanted it.
My blind friend and I was mentioning, we used to play baseball. So ask me how he could tell when the ball was right there to swing the bat at.
I had seen a special where some blind people can actually learn to echolocate. Yeah, but they use, like, I know there's some people that will actually make the sound themselves, and others will use like a clicker or something to make the sound.
But yeah, it's pretty amazing what people can do. I know deaf people that dance wonderfully, and that surprised me, because how can you dance if you can't hear the music? And then I realized, because I was dating a deaf lady at the time, that they actually feel the vibrations of the music and like the bass playing.
Yep, humans can be quite amazing in their adaptability. That's for sure.
Oh, definitely.
One of my son's friends, when he was younger, and my mother-in-law ran a daycare. One of the little girls didn't didn't have from the forearm down. There's just like a little nub, and she could do everything by herself. She'd tie her own shoes and everything. And my son was struggling to learn to tie his shoes at the time. And she was tying them with one hand.
That's actually kind of funny you mentioned that. I have a campaign I play in that I'm playing a one-armed furbolg, druid. And I deal with a lot of issues like trying to row a canoe, trying to tie his apron on because he's an ivory carver. And I talk about how I have ropes and pulley systems that basically allow me to do stuff one-handed.
It just comes down to people who just figure things out, and there's a huge difference between being born a certain way.
Oh yeah,
and and having something happen later in life.
Yeah, it definitely. The people that are born that way or have it since a young age have a huge advantage with special needs because they're forced to learn how to deal with it. Someone who's in their 60s or 50s, 60s is who suddenly get something, they may only start to learn how to deal with it before they pass on.
Brian, I see there's a part of a question in the chat, but it just kind of trails off. But it's always a tricky subject to me because people have these concepts for characters they want to play with disabilities.
Yeah.
But it's always the idea of playing the blind swordsman, right?
Yeah.
They want the idea of playing it, but without any of the actual disability.
Yeah, they want to play it like Daredevil.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, and there is a little bit of truth behind on how Daredevil does things, but it's not the way they make it out.
Well, yeah, but also Daredevil also got exposed to radioactive chemicals.
Exactly.
So.
Hey. But there are ways you can do things. Like, for example, I had a blind NPC, who happened to be a dragon in human form. And the PCs were talking with them, and we had a tiefling and a dragonborn among the group, and he identified their races and called them by their race. And then later they were like, "You couldn't see us. How did you know I was a dragonborn?" Because I can smell the dragon on you.
There's definitely ways to enhance that. And Critical Role, they had a guest come on that played a blind character, a blind wizard, but he did the familiar thing where they allowed him to see through the familiar's eyes. So, which kind of leads into Brian's question: when playing a disabled character, is it weird to put it in the mechanics like a blind character getting disadvantage on checks?
No. Oh, in fact, I've talked with DMs that I've played under, and I insisted on having disadvantage on perception checks that required sight. If I was playing a blind character, unless I had a means of countering it, such as a certain spell that would flash an image within my mind. But I play up the flaws and the drawbacks of having a certain disability or special need.
And I think that's the part that kind of gets me when people want to do that, because they want to play the cool concept of it, but they don't want the drawbacks. And where you're saying, you like, no, I lean into the disability as the role playing. And I would even add to that, yes, disadvantage on things that would affect that impairment. But at the same time, you might compensate by going, well, if it's hearing based, or if your character uses the sense of smell or taste for a lot of things, then they might have advantage on those checks.
Exactly. There's trade-offs. But what I try to do is portray to the best of my knowledge what actually having that disability or special need would be like if that setting was real life.
And then it would also be like really bad in cases of if you're playing the blind monk or blind swordsman and you get hit by the silence spell.
Yeah.
Like, then you know.
Yeah, things can definitely mess up how you work.
But at the same time, if someone hits you with color spray, you're like, whatever. You don't even know it happened. You're still waiting. You hear and maybe sense a caster casting, and you're like still waiting for something to happen.
Yep.
So yeah, I mean, there's definitely a lot of ways you could do it and have fun with it.
Oh yeah, definitely. And I think part of my motivation and for how I portray special needs when I play actually comes from a benefit I've gained from playing. And that's back when I was a teenager, real bad temper, to the point where I would put holes in walls. And I learned to be laid back and control my anger by playing a monk. And I went the typical Tibetan Shaolin monk. But it taught me how to deal with that. And ever since, anytime I struggle with how to deal with something or how to understand a situation, my first instincts, how do they deal with it in a game?
So, Tea Time with Toby, how about in-game prosthetics? There obviously wouldn't be as advanced as the real-world equivalents. Although, I kind of would argue the fact that, like, depending on how magical your world is, you could definitely do something with that.
Oh, definitely. I've had sessions where I had basically a cyber arm implanted into my characters that were missing a limb. And it was a magical artifact.
We actually kind of we actually came up with like one of our races that like, the villainous races that we've been working on, and like they kind of like infiltrated different communities by offering prosthetics and to fix problems by attaching basically Warforged parts to them. But they later used it as a way to create this network or hive mind where they could control them. So, slowly they started building an army.
The Borg.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, there's all sorts of plot hooks and stuff you can do with things like that.
So absolutely. So prosthetics, is that part of the product that you're going to do? It'd be a great magic item section.
Um, that is probably right now the part we actually have completed is the first part, which talks about the disabilities themselves. That they do cover prosthetics in that section, but we do plan on having it in the rest of the PDF as well.
And also there is also, like, it is a fantasy game, right? So
Yeah,
I played a paladin probably back in third edition that had one of his hands removed for
yeah,
stealing. And then he later kind of like came around and changed his life, but then he became really really harsh against criminals and people that broke the law. And he replaced the hand and had a hammer attached to the stump. So it's a fantasy world, so you can definitely do cool things like that. Aquaman at one point had like the trident spear
yeah.
piece harpoon attached to his wrist when he lost the hand.
Yeah, there's all sorts of things you can do. Oh, and it's whatever makes it fun and cool for the people involved.
And even like even looking at like kind of like mainstream, you have Game of Thrones where Jaime Lannister loses his dominant hand.
Yeah, and I think part of that is actually comes from the war veterans that come back missing limbs, and people see them out in society more. So it's kind of come to our attention. People deal with that. Whereas some of the disabilities and special needs aren't so obvious.
And
For for example, oh, you're talking to me outside of my speech impediment, sitting there talking. Would would you know I have autism or arthritis unless I told you?
no, they forgot to tattoo it on your forehead for my convenience.
Exactly. There's a lot of things that just can't be seen, so people wouldn't know.
Well, and I think that's why I'm happy to have you on the show today and other people on the show so we can talk about these things and bring them up, because people aren't really thinking about that stuff. And before we were talking, like, in my personal life, I'm now dealing with some of this as well, and by extension, so is Ted, because it's his sister, my wife, who has just been recently diagnosed, with an autoimmune disease, and it's in the MS family, and it's something we're gonna have to deal with. And she gets winded really quick for things that
Yeah.
most people wouldn't even think of, like unloading the dishwasher or walking across the room
Oh yeah.
for no reason. And like she was.
My biological father lifting himself out of his wheelchair because he's paralyzed from waist down to do something as simple as go to the bathroom. Um, he'll he'll sit on the toilet 20 minutes before after he's done before he's ready to try to lift himself back into his wheelchair.
And I mean, fortunately, we're not there. But even like little things like
Yeah.
she can't lift her feet as high as she used to,
Yeah.
just walking. So she has to watch for tripping hazards now that would never have been a consideration before. She cannot write with her right hand anymore. She has to write with her left
Yeah.
hand. She's really lucky because she's ambidextrous, so
Oh yeah.
she is able to still write.
But I definitely understand for example with my arthritis. Never in my life have I used a cane and had to worry about balance. But one of the things with my arthritis is I get really intense muscle spasms to the point where if I'm standing up, I'll fall. Because I cannot hold myself up while those spasms in my back are happening.
Like I've seen that with my wife where she gets like this spasm in her arm that she doesn't even know. It's like she says it's not pain, but I find it hard to believe from looking at her facial expressions that it's not. Where she has to just stop and she's like holding her arm and has to gather herself before she can
Yeah. I've
move
actually
forward.
fallen in crosswalks on a major road in a big city, Salem, Oregon, uh, uh, to, to where the lights would change and I would be holding up traffic because I could not stand up and move out of the way. And it's something I never in my life would have dealt with it. I never would have thought by the time I was 40 I'd be using a cane. And the main reason I use it is because as when a spasm hits, I can press down on it and keep myself upright. I I still can't move, but at least I'm standing up to where cars can see me if I'm I'm in middle of the road.
And I'm sure I'm sure in a major city the traffic the drivers are so compassionate as well.
It actually surprised me because the time I'm at happened, I had a guy get out of his car. I was carrying 2 bags of cans to turn in because up there it's 5 cents per can. And he got out of his car, put the cans in his car, helped me into his car, drove me the half block to the store, turned in my cans for me, went inside, bought cigarettes for me, then drove me back home.
Oh wow, there might be some hope for humanity after all.
So there, so there are people that will do that in a big city, but it totally floored me because it's a big city. Most of the time, people ignore you.
Yeah, you're everyone's rushing about and doing their thing. DM Don wants to know if a few months back you had a lady on that was doing D&D stuff for disabled. That was Jen Kretschfer. Yeah, we had mentioned her earlier, and I wanted to know if you had talked to her. If you reached out to her on Twitter, she would probably definitely respond.
I
Christopher Rose is another one.
Yeah, I have not had the honor of talking with her. I'm trying to remember Elise's last name. That's the lady I mentioned that does the conventions. But I've actually talked with a couple others who are doing similar things. That's what I'm doing. And
Well, many hands can make the work easier. That's for sure. And it is cool
definitely,
to see like so many people are doing this kind of thing. Even the folks over at Devil's Luck, bless you,
thank
Devil's
you.
Luck Gaming were also doing something as
Yeah.
well. So,
And and I'm glad to see it's getting attention it deserves because of people such as myself and others. Even though I don't consider my particular group as making a huge impact, but
Well, if nothing else, it's probably a nice support group for those people involved for each other. So,
Exactly. And if we inspire one person to at least think about these kind of things, we've done what we set out to do.
Brian Smith has a question. Jaren, you seem
Sure.
like a tech savvy dude. What tools, techniques do you use to make gaming quicker at the table?
um, one of my big ones is a eye roller, and I happen to use the one from the Wizards of the Coast site. I, and that's pretty much all I use outside of what everyone else does with headphones, mics. I do now for my writing. I do have the program Dragon, which is a dictation, and that actually will type for you. Oh, and all you're doing is talking.
Yeah,
Although that one's kind of wonky because of my speech impediment. It doesn't always catch certain words.
Also, how does it do it keeping up with words that are kind of like made up words,
Uh,
like illithid?
it 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 does its best, but it does have a tendency to misspell alum, and then you have to go back in and manually type it. Uh, but it does save me a quite a bit of time. When I'm trying to get the core concept and core writing of something down.
I imagine every little bit can help. So, with that, we're coming up on the hour mark. I'd like you to take some time and tell people where they can find you. Of course, I have some links in the description as well, and
Yes.
something you want to leave people with before we head on out.
Okay. Okay. Uh, I'm on Facebook, on Twitter as the Disabled DM. Facebook is German D&D. We have a community group called Power Up Gamers as role players for accessibility. We have a YouTube channel. Also, I'm pretty easy to get hold of. The quickest way is Facebook and friend and German D&D. You'll only find one of me. And
Well, that's awesome, man. I really appreciate you coming on and talking about this stuff. And you guys go to Drive Through RPG, check out Legat's Tome of Amazing Creatures that's over there. Like I said, I really dig in on the art. There's a lot of content there to dig into. Thanks
that
everyone for watching today.
as
Uh,
as I definitely had a blast, although it kind of took a different twist than I expected. I kind of expected more on the God's Tomb of Amazing Creatures. And we actually have a Fiasco playset that will be out soon called a Fiasco in Camelot.
Awesome.
That, that's on Drive Through RPG as well.
Sorry if I hijacked the topic on you.
Oh, no problem. I enjoy or yeah, regardless. I love talking about accessibility because it's so important to me.
So with that, thanks everyone, and until next time, stay nerdy.